Hello, Mark Red Larson coming to you from Hastings, Nebraska. Actually, it's a beautiful day. Sun's out. Looks like maybe you could shower later, but it's beautiful. It's spring. I'm actually sitting in a flower garden that they have at this one park in Hastings, Nebraska, and it is just gorgeous. And that's why I love spring so much. So today, I didn't know what I was going to do for the podcast, the Dreamcatcher podcast episode today, but I asked my good friend Caleb, and he's like, so why don't you talk about how being fear and being afraid keeps people from getting their dreams? And, it got me to thinking how much fear definitely plays a part in whether people get their dreams or live their dreams. But it also plays a part in so many things in our life. You just think, and it's like I hear people saying, I'm so afraid that this is going to happen. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm afraid that, and I think most of us don't even realize we're saying that. And how are you going to get your dreams if you're afraid of everything? And pretty much, I think that's why people live small lives. And I'm not saying small to the potential they could be, living. And it's just like doing this podcast. I get so many people that it's like, oh, I'm afraid that I'll make a fool of myself. I'm afraid, I don't look good enough, or I'm afraid, I don't know what to say. And there's so many things that they're afraid of that they don't take the action necessary to do podcast or whatever it may be that they're wanting to do. And actually, I can tell you a podcast is, but I'm almost up to 300 episodes. But it's very simple. Basically, just having a conversation with a piece of, equipment and some awesome people most of the time. Sometimes it's just you and me. And I used to be afraid. When I started out, I was so regimented that I had questions, and I was so afraid I was going to make, I was going to do it wrong. Nice thing about podcasting, I don't think there is a way to do it wrong. It's your way, and that's what is so refreshing about podcasting, because there really is no right or wrong way, and it's very cool. But going back to catching your dreams, so I think, and I talked to, in the podcast, if you've listened and watched any of the past episodes, I always asked what their dreams were growing up. And most people have dreams that they wanted to do when they were growing up, but most people didn't do it. And I believe most of the time, one thing, reality, being an adult, growing up, all this BS that they feed you when you're, growing up, keeps you from doing it because you're afraid you won't be successful. You're afraid you won't have enough money to pay your bills. You're afraid that, that it's like, well, what are they going to think? I'm afraid what they're going to think, that's not the way I want to do it. I want to play it safe. And so in reality, you never get your dreams. And it sneaks in even when I don't even think about it, being afraid. It's just like when I was coming to this park, I was afraid that it might shower, or rain or whatever. And it's like, when I was younger, and not that long ago, when I still was older, but younger than I am now, and I would have not even thought of that. I would not have had the mindset to think. I would just said that, and it's like I probably wouldn't have done the podcast out in the park. And but now it's just like, if it rains, cool. Might do it as long as my phone doesn't get really wet. Might continue. Might do it later. It's not going to be it's not life or death. And that is the mindset that I think you need to get to have a really great life, because nothing is really life or death. And that's where I think you need to go when you're doing your dreams, because whatever it is, let's say you want to be a traveler, and I hear people, and Cheryl and I love to travel, and it's just like, well, I've never been to Europe. And Cheryl and I Cheryl had been to Europe when she was younger. I had never been to Europe until 2 years ago. And I was a little afraid, but it's just like, I don't think unless the plane crashes, it's going to kill me. And the way it turned out, it was awesome. Italy was awesome. Germany, a little bit we were in there, was awesome. Actually, the plane trip, which was long, but was awesome. It was so easy. It was so easy. But so many people are afraid that to do something like that. And I'm in a strange country. And Italy was not at all like I thought it was going to be. We were in southern Italy, and the people were so friendly. Almost everybody knew English, could speak English. We had moved our money over to, or euros, and pretty much everybody took credit cards, and everybody's laid back too. It was refreshing compared to the hustle bustle we have here continually in the United States. But I apologize for the wind. There might be a little bit of wind noise, but it is what it is. So for Nebraska, this is pretty good. Very little breeze today, but if I'd have been so afraid about the plane trip, the going through customs, going through, everything, I wouldn't have done it. So that's where being afraid and fear gets into keeping you from living your best life. And it's just, and also people, and I'm one of them. That's one thing I fear, is speaking in front of people, in front of a live audience, and that is something where my good friend Dave, because I have the 300th episode of the Dreamcatcher podcast coming up in not very many weeks, and he's like doing it live and having a call-in back and forth, and which I think I'm going to see if I can get that to work. I'm not sure how, but one way or the other, I'll do something like that. But I would have never done that because I would have been afraid, what I might mess up or something like that. And just next time you're talking, listen to what your self-talk is and listen to what you're actually talking. So because that keeps you small. So I've got two young men coming to, I think, see what I'm doing. Maybe they're going to be on the podcast. So, but anyway, it's cool when you become aware of your fears and you don't let them stop you, because most people let fear stop them. And it's just like a few years ago where I met all Caleb and Dave and everything at the YMCA. I was afraid of what I would look like. I didn't know any, I really never worked out on equipment. Didn't know how to swim. Didn't know a lot of things. And I didn't let, it was a factor that I thought of, but it's just like, no, I'm not going to let that happen. Plus, my health kind of dictated that I needed to do something like that. And I guess maybe that fear was good because that fear pushed me to the why. So fear can, I guess, if you use it to move you forward, then fear is good. But most of the time, I have a friend that I went to college with, and I've been trying to get him to come to the gym or Y or whatever one he would be willing to go to. And he's like, nah, I'd look stupid. I'd be self-conscious and all this stuff. And I said, most people are thinking only about themselves. They're not thinking about you at all anyway. But this fear is keeping you from going to the Y or the gym. And that kind of fear is harmful. And he's getting to the age where it's like at the end of his work career and thinking about moving into town, and basically the fear of, I can't do the yard anymore. I can't do, because he's got a big yard. He lives out in the country, awesome yard. And but he's the fear of the gym, the fear of, and then he said they had been getting right on the dot for all their retirement. And the fear of not having enough money into retirement. And I told him, I was like, that can be gone in a split second. Ask Cheryl and I for the medical expenses and stuff like that. So, the fear of that can occur even if with the best laid plans. But you can't prepare for everything. And sometimes you just have to go for it. And I think that is actually one of the better ways to live your life. Just go for it. And if it's going to kill you, I don't think that's good. But just think how much you learn when you just go for it. It's just like, I'll deal with it as I go along. And that's what, with all the times with Cheryl, my wife, and all her medical expenses and stuff, it's just like, you have to do it. You have to do it. The fear's there. It is intense fear too, because the medical bills are astronomical, and even with health insurance, they're astronomical, because it's not the deductible; it's the maximum out of pocket that get you. And yeah, I'm not going on that tangent because it's too negative. But at least with this last bout with Cheryl's issues and everything, the insurance is doing pretty well. So that's a blessing. But and I think it might have stopped Cheryl from doing the test because of the fear of the cost of it. And I told her, and she's even apologized to me for having all these expenses she'd rung up. And it's like, you wouldn't know you were well until you went through the test. So don't apologize. It was just what had to be done. And but going back to your dreams, what are your dreams? What are your dreams? You know, like I said, I ask on this podcast what people's dreams are. And I've had a couple times where nobody had any dreams growing up. I don't know if I believe that, but they don't remember them. And put those dreams down there and make them non-negotiable. It's like, I'm going to travel to Portugal and hope to do that soon, to see Jack over there and his family in Lisbon. Hopefully soon. And because he's got it all lined up for us. And Jack Murray is an awesome dude from Canada, going for his dream of being a professional soccer player. And he's really doing it. He's very inspirational. And he's just an amazing kid. But you know, that could have been very much fear. You know, his whole family picked up from Canada and moved to Portugal, a strange country, didn't know the language. They tell me Portuguese is not the easiest language to pick up and speak, but they did it anyway. They didn't let the fear keep them in Canada. And there's no doubt that there's been times when Jack's been maybe not. Jack seems fearless, but I don't know if that person exists in the world. But he's very motivational. He's inspiration. He's like, he does what you need to do. And so don't let fear dictate your day. Don't let it dictate your life. Don't let it dictate your dreams. You know, and stop saying I'm afraid, because your body, your brain's always listening. It's like, oh, they're afraid, so maybe I better be afraid. And because it's always listening. You know, your mind and everything is always listening to what you say. And just like, no, I'm not afraid. And even if I am, it's do it afraid. That is very much true. Kind of like doing this podcast for the first time, doing this out in public. Still, I mean, I don't really care because I'm just look like I'm talking to myself. But what else? And that was one thing when I was younger. I didn't speak at all. If anybody who's watched these before, and I let fear keep me from basically doing anything growing up. I basically kept to myself. I didn't speak because if I didn't speak, I couldn't get, something going on with me that I was afraid was going to be bad. There's the fear again. I didn't do sports, and now with the why, I find out that sports is pretty awesome, and working out's awesome. And but I didn't do anything. In fact, everybody who's in my class in high school is like, so what happened? You really found your voice. And I did. But I mean, I didn't go out for track. I didn't go out for any sports at all. I didn't do anything. And even in PE, physical education, I was afraid of what people would think of my body because I was quite overweight for most of it. And I thought, and I would change into my clothes for PE, in the stall. So, so nobody could, because I was afraid what people would think. And that still comes up occasionally when I'm in the locker room at the Y. But it's just like, I do it anyway. And it's interesting how that gets so ingrained in you that it has to be a conscious effort on your part to get over the fear. And do it. Like I said, do it afraid. Do it anyway. Do whatever this is. If you want to lose like so much weight at the Y or whatever, something like that, it becomes non-negotiable, and you do whatever it takes to do that. And if you have a fearful day, you do it anyway, just like this rabbit over here. He's watching me. Yeah, you're listening, aren't you? So he's definitely not afraid of me. He's like, yeah, he's just talking. But don't let fear keep you from doing what you need to do to live your best life. Because like I said, there's people out there waiting for you to get your best life so you can help them. There's, like I was talking to, I think it was Dave, yesterday with the ripple, of doing this podcast. How many people, I had 2 people yesterday that it was awesome. In fact, one said I was a godsend, and just because of the podcast. And I'm grateful. I'm honored that if you get any good out of this, very honored. But if I had let fear keep me from doing this, you wouldn't be hearing me or seeing me. And so right there is showing that you just have to do it. And I think my dad, I think he doesn't want to go to he could go to a senior place, and I think he's afraid, because he's never been really outgoing. He's more now than he ever has been, but the fear is keeping him from going there, and it's an awesome place. In fact, they might be on the podcast coming up. But how many people in the relationships and card games or whatever, actually this place is going to Ireland. It's just like, oh wow, this is a really cool place. I really like that. And that's one thing I've also, I go and approach these, like yesterday when I ate at, can't remember the name of the Bullseye, for lunch. When I was younger, I would have been afraid to go in there and just walk. And I go in and I sit up at the bar and have my lunch. And, it used to make me very afraid doing that. And not anymore. Not at all. In fact, I enjoy it. I thrive on it. And it's amazing how when you kind of take care of the fears can actually turn and be something you really crave, kind of like the sports, kind of like going and talking to people, kind of like doing this. I've always wanted to help people. I just was too scared and afraid when I was younger. And I thank Caleb for bringing up this topic, because I didn't know what I was going to talk about on this episode of Dreamcatcher. But fear controls so much of us. We're afraid we're not going to have enough, like I said, pay the bills, not enough for retirement, not enough to whatever it is. Write it down. Every time you have a fear in a 24-hour period, I want you to write it down. And I want to see, and I think I'm going to do it too, I want to see how many fears do you have that are keeping you from doing something. Who knows what it is? Going and taking swimming lessons. Maybe going up and speaking on a stage. That would be me so far. But we're getting there. I'm working on that fear greatly. And I actually was asked that maybe I could do a class for podcasting at a community college. And, that didn't even intimidate me anymore. If I lived in that town, I would probably do it, but it's an hour away, each way. So, but I'm honored that they asked me. And before, I probably would have passed out if they'd asked me that. It's just like, I can't do that. I'm too afraid. And, but not anymore. So, and if I hadn't gone to the Y, I wouldn't have met, because I put a post up yesterday that my home away from home, because this Y and every Y I've been to really is like family. And if I had let the fear keep me from going to the Y, or a gym, whatever, I would have never known what it's like to have that kind of support and awesome people around you. And I just think to all the things that when you overcome your fears or work on overcoming them, how many things in life get better. You travel, you go work out, you're healthier. You maybe do a podcast, maybe you go volunteer. There's so many things that keep you playing small. And fear is always in my beliefs, is always at the bottom of what is causing that fear. I don't know if that made sense, but the fear is keeping you small, and it keeps you from doing stuff that you truly probably would enjoy. And the people that you would meet, you don't, because of the fear. So on that, I got beautiful flowers all around me, and I'm going to go take a nice walk in this park. Would have been fearful of doing that by myself not too many years ago, because I was like, oh, what's this guy doing? He's all by himself. He's just looking at pretty flowers, taking pictures, which anybody who knows me, I take just a few. And, but yeah, I want you to do that homework. Write down in a 24-hour period how many times fear keeps you from doing something, whether it's going on a trip, whatever it is. We've already talked about that, so not going to talk anymore. I'm fearful you might leave. So, and if you choose to do it, that's cool. I just have the best of intentions doing these podcasts, and I hope it resonates with you. And I hope that my lack of fear of doing these gets you to maybe do a podcast. Got a lot of people that I potentially have that I'm going to help start podcasts. And I want to be a blessing to them and everybody that they put their podcast out to. So on that, I'm going to end this episode of the Dreamcatcher podcast. And don't let fear dictate your life. Fear keeps you playing small, keeps you living a life that's uninspired. It's just maybe quote unquote safe, but how great is a safe life? I mean, safe, and I don't mean like you're protected for something, but kind of. You're actually not protected from something because you're not living the stuff that you could be doing if you didn't let the fear dictate your life. So on that, everybody have a great day. Thanks for joining me on this episode, and we'll be talking soon. Bye.